Good evening, and welcome to the Fantasy Drink. I'm Jared Quartermanch, and tonight we will be doing issue 2 of Comic versus Prose. We got Dark Horse Comics issue number 2 of Assassin's Apprentice, and we'll be going over chapter 2 in Assassin's Apprentice in the Robin Hobb novel. But first things first, like and subscribe, please. And then tonight's drink, Heaven's Door. This is by I don't know who it's by, but it's a very good whiskey that has a nice vanilla notes and baking spices laid over a bed of toasted oak. It's got Bob Dylan's name on it, so can't be all that bad. Um, but very tasty, very good bourbon. So to get right into this, we are going to open up to page 1 here. In Robin Hobb's novels, she always has that little prologue to the chapter, kind of, that is in italics, supposedly written in Fitz's hand, and that is copied word for word right onto the page in the captions. And we then skip the next few paragraphs that aren't in here. Those paragraphs give us a little history about Buckkeep, where they're at, and so we don't get that sense in the comic, that little history. What we do get is about the third paragraph in. There's a paragraph about the ruling houses of the six duchies and who they're descended from. So they get a little bit of a sense of this character Fitz's bloodline and where his looks come from. Um, we also get a good sense of the how Burich conveys himself, his kind of the mentor here for Fitz. Um, Burich has this look of consternation. He's very stoic, and he's looks worried all the time, and that shows very well in the artwork. And he has a lot to worry about. His prince just abdicated the throne last issue, and so he's probably worried about his own future and the future of his young ward here. So I thought the artist pulled that off very well. And they also skip over a few more paragraphs. Some of it's descriptive of Buckkeep, which you can see in the backgrounds here. The artist does a great job of conveying the bustling activity of the keep without overcrowding our senses with background drawings. He just gives you different angles that show how the keep is a a bustling place with a lot of activity going on, and he uses those angles smartly. So we then get to the point where there's one section in the book here that's not shown in here, and that is the dog Nosy um, was kind of wanting to play, and Fitz was in no mood. He was kind of weary and half sick, and really didn't want to play, and he was trying to convey that to the dog, and so I don't know the significance of that line in the novel yet, other than, well, we'll see. But that wasn't conveyed. That part wasn't conveyed in the comic, so something to remember there. And some of the dialogue on page 2 and 3 here are literally just taken right from the book, and why not? Because it's good dialogue. It works well, and we get a good sense of what's going on through that dialogue and through, of course, the pictures being very descriptive, which takes the place of a couple of paragraphs in here. And that moves right on up to where an important scene here where the Fitz is confronted by a passerby, who recognizes the boy as the bastard, and just kind of starts picking on him. Who's your mother? And the uh, the puppy is worried. He can't defend him, and then he starts yelling out to the crowd. You can imagine the sense of consternation and worry on the boy's face in the drawings here, and the artist does a good job of getting that through. And finally, Fitz uses his power there. And in the book, it's described as repelled. He repelled the man away from him. It is in italics in the book, so that to give you the sense that it's different from the rest of the words for a reason there. So that's kind of Hobbes' description of what the magic's doing. In the comic, we just have him screaming no, and you see kind of like this greenish magic mist around him that's throwing itself out to the man, who is then knocked on the ground. Um, so that was a comic book creator's choice to show this repelling thing. They don't describe it that way in the comic, but they show that repelling, and I thought that was pretty well done. I liked how they do that in the comic book here. And so once again, we have a bunch of description of him running away and hiding, and a lot of description of the of Buckkeep again, and how the night sky looks over it, and we see that in the pictures, and it's like it's nicely conveyed and beautifully drawn. We move up to the point where Burich is waiting for him to come back, and he once again, the dialogue's taken word for word out of the book. Great dialogue. And the next day, Fitz is back out into the world. He's one little important scene here is that he's walking around, and in the novel it explains to us that Fitz doesn't understand that a about a puppet show that has already incorporated Chivalry's Falls from Grace into a body comedy. And Fitz just stood anonymous in the crowd and didn't notice that. In the comic, it just shows it in the background, and there's some dialogue coming from the puppets in the puppet show. But in the comic, it just shows Fitz kind of looking at it as he's walking by, and there's people laughing, and him and the dog are kind of communing with each other, and they don't really understand what all the laughing is about, and they kind of just take off. And but I thought that was very key, that you really have to pay attention to some of these background pictures in the comic book if you want to get the full sense of story. These pictures are telling you a story, and so it's really good to pay attention to that stuff. Finally, we come to a very important scene where Fitz meets up with some other orphans in the in Buckkeep, and what's her name, Kerry, in particular. He sees Kerry fighting with another boy about her age, but I think they say 12, and the they don't exactly spell that out in the comic, but I know the book says that. But you can kind of guess in the comic, once again, by the great artwork, you kind of get a sense of how old these older kids are than Fitz. And she's in a fight with this kid. It's one of those fights that kids get in. It's not too serious, but uh, the she's giving him a tongue lashing, basically. In the book, it simply states, and her sharp tongue taunts soon had everyone laughing at him. In the comic, they actually uh, give actual dialogue for those sharp tongue taunts, so that she can, so that you actually get that rather than just a description of it. So I thought that was a neat inclusion by the comic book team to do that. And so, in another sense that gives our connection to the dog, between the dog and Fitz, the kid who was being taunted starts yelling at Fitz, who he calls New Boy, name of the chapter, and the dog, of course, goes "Rawr," growls and snaps at him, and of course that just gives Kerry that much more ammunition to make fun of our boy. And I thought that was all very well done um, in the comic, which only is quickly described in the book. Um, Either way, the big scene here is when the father comes in and they have their altercation, Carrie and the father. The father is drunk. He comes in, and he hits her. The main thing that I wanted to point out here is, once again, the dialogue's spot on, but it was the description of the father in the book. He's like a gangly man, caught her smack on the side of the head. He was a skinny man, red nosed and raw boned, so that his fist was like a knot at the end of his bony arm. But the blow was still enough to send Molly sprawling. And I thought that was just brilliantly drawn in the comic. I'm gonna hold this page up here. So that description I just gave you, just take a look at it and see. I mean, look at that. Faithless little muscat, you know? Does that description not fit that guy that you see drawn there? I think it does. And I think it's a great job by the artist to do that. So, we go through that whole scene. It's pretty much the next couple pages of our panel by panel, word by word, done brilliantly here in the book, and the uh, the comic does a great job of displaying that whole thing. Even the part where they lift him up and he grudgingly goes after, you know, after Fitz gives the word again, does a little magic and knocks the father over, thinking he's trying to save Carrie. They just portrayed the whole the whole conflict beautifully, and so I won't get into that any further. It was just well done. They We go further into the the chapter. Um, and we're shown in the next couple pages in the comic that Fitz is living this life. He's kind of become a street rat, an urchin who does makes a living by actually delivering messages, and then he gets caught stealing some sausages. In the book, the encounter of him getting caught with between the merchant and Burrich is actually a bit more violent than what they show in the comic. In the book, he gets cuffed, and then he allows the merchant to cuff him too. Like this was you know, and in the book, he just kind of runs into Burrich, and Burrich pays off the merchant, and he just says get home now, and then we skip to the scene where he's at home. And so that was another interesting choice by the comic book creators to show something a little different here. Um, and so then we get to the saddest scene in the novel and in the comic here. Now, once again, of course, this is all very spoilery. So if you don't want to hear the sad scene here, then I suggest you go read it, get the comic. Basically, the last few pages of the book are Burris trying to describe to Fitz what it is like to have this blood in him, and what it's going to do to him when he gets older. If he keeps this connection with the dog, he's going to turn into a beast, an animal, and he's not going to be a human any longer if he can't control it. So, unfortunately, there's a confrontation between them. We find out Bjork's got a little bit of magic on his own, and so then he takes the dog away. A really well done, significant panel on the last page of the book is when we know the dog is getting killed off screen from Fitz's point of view, but but he can feel it. He feels the cut connection. And the comic uses kind of a slashed panel with red in it, and that's it. And it was just and the one before it was a red picture of the dog. Oh, help me. And so it was very heartbreaking and very uh you know emotional. It was emotional time in the book, and hit pretty hard. So the one thing that in the last panel of the comic, it just shows Fitz lying on the ground, kind of, and but in the novel, it has the last line is utter loneliness was planted in me then, and sent its deep roots down into me. And I'm kind of wondering why the comic wouldn't have included that there. It seems to me to be an important line, but that is the end of chapter 2. So we'll see how that comes next issue. So thank you for bearing with me here. It's probably one of my longer videos, but I really like the comparison of these two mediums, and I think the comic creators are doing a really great job of conveying to us, um, this classic novel that I'm reading for the first time. So this is kind of fun, and I hope you enjoyed it. All right, have a good night, and bottoms up.